Hi guys, you're very welcome along to this exam revision video. In this video we are going to look at the Leaving Cert Chemistry course, and we're particularly going to look at the layout of the paper and some predictions for the 2024 exam. So let's start with looking at the exam paper layout. So with your Leaving Cert Chemistry exam, there is two sections on the paper. There is section A, which consists of 3 questions, and section B, which consists of 8. Now, with section A, these 3 questions are going to be on your experiments, and we are going to see in a few moments when we dig deeper into the paper that these are split into your titrations. We have organic experiments, and then we have the question that I call the other. Section B then is 8 questions. It consists of all the different topics that are on the Leaving Cert Chemistry course. Some questions of internal choice, some don't, and we'll get to that in a few minutes. With the paper, again this year you're going to be able to answer any 8 questions off the paper, so you don't need to worry about answering a specific number of questions from section A or section B. You can answer any 8. So make sure to use this to your advantage. Each question on the paper is worth 50 marks, and that gives us a total of 400 marks. Now, if you are looking to get a H1 in your Leaving Cert Chemistry paper this year, you need to get a minimum of 360 marks out of 400. So that means that the maximum amount of marks that you can lose is 40 marks overall, and that averages out at approximately 5 marks per question. So it is very, very tight. To get your H1, you really need to know your chemistry course inside out. You need to have all your definitions, all of your keywords, everything like that needs to be sorted. And this is where exam revision can come in and help you. On the exam revision website, we cover the complete Leaving Cert Chemistry course in short, bite-sized 10 to 12 minute videos going through different parts of each topic. There's worked examples of calculations, we go through experiments, we go through theory. Along with that, you'll get H1 standard notes, PowerPoint presentations, and self-correcting quizzes, along with access to an exam builder and tracker to keep track of how much of the course you've completed. But we'll go through that in a few minutes as we work through the video. So let's take a look at the timing of your Leaving Cert Chemistry exam. So you have 3 hours to do your Leaving Cert Chemistry exam, and that is approximately 180 minutes. So that's loads of time, but I tend to break it down then into little subsections. So I would recommend spending 10 minutes at the beginning of the exam, just reading through it and scanning through. From this, you could pick your questions based off the topics that you can see. So by reading through the paper, you'll see what topics have appeared. And from then, you could decide maybe what questions you are most likely going to do. Then at the end, again, I always like to leave 10 minutes at the end. The 10 minutes at the end can be to check over any answers that you have written. If there's any gaps or parts that you've skipped, you could maybe spend that 10 minutes trying to get the answers to those at the end as well. Maybe there's a calculation you didn't get finished out and you want to go back and try it again. That's what that 10 minutes is for at the end. Then that leaves us with approximately 20 minutes per question to complete a question. I don't recommend going over the 20 minutes on each question, because if you go over 20 minutes on one question, it means you're eating into the 20 minutes that you have for another question. So obviously, if you're finished a question early, that's great. You can bank the time, but I definitely wouldn't go over the 20 minutes at the beginning anyway for the first few questions, because otherwise you may run out of time at the end. It's important to remember that all questions carry equal marks, so that's why I say you should be spending the same amount of time on each question, because all the questions have the same amount of marks going for them. They're all worth 50. So if you spend longer on one question than another, the maximum you can still get is 50. So make sure to spend an equal amount of time on each question, and I recommend that is 20 minutes. So let's dive deeper into the paper now, and let's take a look at section A. So as I said, with section A, they are all experimental questions. Section A is where you will see all of your experiments pop up. Some of them may appear in section B, but in section A they can only really ask you on experiments, and they're going to be long questions on experiments. The first question 1 is always a titration, and with that it could be an acid-base titration, or a redox titration, or a water titration. So question 2 then is your organic experiments. So there you're looking at soap, clove oil, your benzoic acid, etc. And then question 3 is the other. So with that, it's any experiment that hasn't or cannot be asked in question 1 and question 2. So question 3, it can be anything other than a titration and your organic experiments. So there I would be looking at water, equilibrium, rates of reaction, properties of gases. They're all very common to come up there. So let's take a little deeper dive now into each of these individual questions. So if we take a look at our question 1 for our titrations, we can see here I've kind of got a list of 11, and we're going to put them into the categories of acid base, redox and water. So we have a look here to numbers 1 to 5 here. These are all linked with your acid base titration. So number 1 there, it's making a standard solution of sodium carbonate. So straight away there, topical things for that question. What is a standard solution? You definitely need to know the correct procedures for making up a standard solution. So you should be knowing your equipment and your technique there. You should know how you should be washing your equipment, etc. Question or number 2 there then, it says using that standard solution of sodium carbonate to find the concentration of HCl solution. Number 3, using a standardized solution of HCl to work out the concentration of a solution of sodium hydroxide. Number 4, using a standard solution of sodium hydroxide to work out the concentration of ethanoic acid in vinegar. Now this is a popular one, and if this was to come up, you would need to know calculations such as percentage volume per volume. You'll be working with moles there, you could be working with grams, and also you could be working with volumes of centimetres cubed. So quite a few calculations that can appear in that one. Most of the time then you're also going to be working with a dilution factor in that one as well. Number 5 then is the last of the acid-base titrations on the course, and it's to determine the amount of water crystallization in a hydrated sodium carbonate solution of washing soda. So with this, remember, you're going to be finding the value of your X, because this experiment will have your sodium carbonate with an XH2O, and usually they ask you for the percentage water crystallization and then the value of X in your formula. So if we move on, 6 to 9 then, they are our next batch, and these are your oxidation reduction titrations. So usually I would pair 6 and 7 together, and 8 and 9. And if we take a look at 6 and 7, so 6 says to use a standard solution of ammonium iron 2 sulfate to standardise a solution of potassium permanganate, and 7 says using a standard solution of potassium permanganate to work out the amount of iron in an iron tablet. So for both of these, in 6 and 7, you are working with KMnO4. So that means simple details like no indicator is going to be required, because KMnO4 is self-indicating. It's a powerful oxidizing agent. You must read from the top of the meniscus. All those kind of tips and tricks that you would have learned and that can be found in all of our videos on examrevision.ie will help you along there. I then pair 8 and 9 together, because here in 8 you're looking to prepare a solution of sodium thiosulfate and standardise it with a solution of iodine, and then to determine the percentage weight per volume of sodium hypochlorite in bleach. Now the reason I put these together is they are, both of them involve iodine, but they also involve starch as an indicator. So with 8 and 9 here, you're going to be looking for colour changes such as a straw yellow colour developing, blue-black colour when you add in your starch, that goes colourless, etc. So that's why I pair those together. And again, very important to know, particularly in that experiment, your series of colour changes that occur. The last two then on this list are your water titrations, 10 and 11. So 10 is asking you to measure the level of hardness of a sample of water using EDTA, and number 11 is measuring the level of dissolved oxygen present in water, i.e. working out the biochemical oxygen demand. Now, what I would say to you, your top tip for your titrations, you definitely need to know your indicator and your colour change. That can be worth up to 9 marks in an exam, and so very important to know. The second thing I would say to you is it is advisable to know the first principles calculations. There is your formula out there, and the formula does work sometimes, but it is not guaranteed. It depends how the question comes up. So it's not that the formula isn't accepted, it is, but it requires a little bit of extra work in certain cases. So since around 2015, the preferable method has been first principles. And again, as I said, it depends on the way the question comes up. If they ask you just to calculate the concentration of something in moles per litre, that's fine, you'll probably get away with the formula. But once they start diving a little bit deeper and they ask you for the concentration of your standard solution in a titration volume or in a centimetre cubed, at that point then you're going to struggle with the formula. So first principles would be a more advisable route there. And if you are struggling with any sort of first principles calculation or any calculation, we have you covered on examrevision.ie. For each of these titrations that are listed here, I have a first principles calculation completed for each one of them and a full explanation why. So you can check that out on examrevision.ie. The next question in section A will be question 2, and it's your organic experiments. And here we have a list of 9 organic experiments. So the first 2 are fairly handy. You've got the preparation of ethene and to examine its properties, and you've got the preparation of ethyne and to examine its properties. So when we're looking at ethene and ethyne and we're looking at our properties, the properties that you're going to be looking at are, you're going to be looking at combustion, and then you are going to be looking at tests for unsaturation. Now, with your tests for unsaturation, there's 2 chemicals that you use here. You use bromine water and you can use acidified KMNO4. Usually in an exam they will ask you one or the other, but it's very important that you know for both of these then the colour change, the starting colour, etc. It's important to remember if they ask you for a test for unsaturation, you cannot use you cannot use the combustion test. That is not a test for unsaturation. The test for unsaturation involves the use of your bromine water and your acidified KMNO4, whichever you prefer. Number 3 here is the heat of reaction, so it's your polystyrene cup experiment, and here this is linked with the thermochemistry part of the course. So you're going to be doing a calculation on that, and if you need help with that calculation, we have it covered on our website. Next, number 4, you've got the extraction of clove oil and its isolation. So I would like to highlight here that this is 2 parts to the experiment. Extraction of clove oil, that is by steam distillation. And then we also have here, as I've said, it's isolation, that is the second part, and the isolation occurs by liquid extraction. So some keywords to remember for these ones. For your extraction of clove oil, do you know why is the safety tube used in your pressure generator? Then you've got your steam trap, why is it there? Why aren't the cloves heated directly? Why are they steamed? You form something called an emulsion. What is an emulsion? Then for your isolation, you're looking at organic washing, your liquid extraction, your drying agent, how it should be, how you could isolate the eugenol from your organic layer, etc. Then number 5, it's to prepare a sample of soap. So that is your base hydrolysis of an ester or your saponification. Number 6 here, you'll see it's split into parts as well. It's your benzoic acid, but it's the oxidation of phenylmethanol to benzoic acid, i.e. your preparation of benzoic acid. You've got your recrystallization of benzoic acid, and what does that do to our purity of our benzoic acid, and then looking at our melting point. And with your melting point, you will be looking along the lines of what does the melting point range tell us about the purity of our sample. 7 and 8 then, you've got properties of ethanol and properties of ethanoic acid, and number 9 then is chromatography. So I would think chromatography could be thrown in at the end of a question. When you're looking at chromatography, you're looking at HPLC, GC, UV vis and IR, and all of those are covered in one video on examrevision.ie, so it's very, very useful if you would like some revision on that. In some top tips for this question, you need to know your percentage yield calculations. So if you need to know your percentage yield calculations, you need to know your theoretical yield, You need to be able to calculate your percentage yield by doing actual over theoretical. You also need to look at your limiting reagent, being able to identify that. And we have lots of examples of that covered on our website for you to check out. Another tip is you definitely need to know the reagents and catalysts that are used in these experiments. And a top tip I would actually give you is to make sure that you label it correctly. So in an exam, they may say, what is the reagent and catalyst? And I see students an awful lot of the time just writing them down and not labeling them. If they're not labelled, they will be marked based off the order that they are asked in the question. So just to save yourself any confusion, always write down reagent equals catalyst equals to maximise your marks. So question 3, I always call this the other question, and in recent years this question has actually turned into a question of multiple parts. They have often split it, the examiners have often split it into A, B and C. So part A was on one experiment, part B was on another, and part C was on another. So just to be aware of that for question 3, there can be a lot of content in it, but the content is fairly narrow if you are good with experiments and happy to learn about them. So the first two here, they're kind of all individualistic. So number 1, you've got your flame tests. Number 2, you've got your oxidation reduction reactions and displacement of metals. Number 3, you've got tests for anions. And number 4, you've got the relative molecular mass of a volatile liquid. So they're all quite separate, but from there down then we can start to pair things up or put them into groups. So 5 and 6 here, we can put these together. These are based off the rates of reaction. So number 5 is monitoring the rate of production of oxygen from hydrogen peroxide using manganese dioxide as a catalyst. And this should be a handy one. You may have met it from junior cycle. But also with this one, you will be looking here at calculating your average rate or your instantaneous rate. You will probably be asked to draw a graph as well. So important that you have all those skills before you try attempting this question. 6 there on that list, then studying the effects on the reaction rate of concentration and temperature. So here they are 2 separate parts. So you could be asked about the concentration or you could be asked about the temperature. Again, you may be asked to draw a graph, but this mainly links in with your factors affecting the rate of reaction and some descriptions around that. Number 7 then is a standalone one. It's the simple experiments to illustrate Le Chatelier's principle, and we know that that comes from the equilibrium chapter. Questions 8, 9 and 10 and 11 here then, these are all from water, so I'm going to put them all in green. But they all have their own unique calculation, they all have their own unique methods. So number 8 there is the determination of free chlorine in swimming pool water or bleach using a colorimeter or a comparator. Number 9, the amount of total suspended solids expressed in parts per million in a water sample. 10, determination of total dissolved solids expressed in parts per million in a water sample. And number 11, determination of pH of a sample of water. If I was to be looking at this, I would think 9, 10 and 11 could come up together in a question if they were trying to look for a water one. But as you can see, lots of different skills required here. For your 9 and 10 there of suspended solids and dissolved solids, you need to be comfortable working in ppm, which is parts per million, etc. That's section A completed, so let's take a look at section B. So with the section B, there will be 8 questions in this section, and some of them have choice and some of them do not. So question 4 does have internal choice. There is going to be 12 parts in this question this year, and you only need to answer 8 of them. Now, what I recommend for question 4 is that you attempt as many of them as you can, and we'll see why in a moment. Another set of questions that have internal choice in them are question 10 and 11. So they usually have 3 or 4 parts, of which you only need to do 2. Where questions 5 to 9, they have no internal choice. So once you do them, you have to do every single part and you will be marked on every single part. So if you leave a bit out, you're automatically going to be losing marks. So just be aware of that with questions 5 to 9. So if we take a look at section B, questions 4, 5 and 6 first. As I said already, section B, question 4, it's going to have 12 parts, of which you have to answer 8, and part L is coming from the option. So if you do not complete the option part with your teacher, then there is 11 parts that you will be able to answer, of which you have to answer 8. Now with question 4, it's very precise. Your answers are going to be very short. It's going to look an awful lot at definitions, you're going to be looking at some short calculations, so some short mass or mole calculations. You're pretty much always going to get an electronic configuration there as well. You're also going to have some theory on the atom and the periodic table as well. With question 4, there is no negative marking, and that is really important. So that's why I say it's important in question 4 to answer as many parts as you can, because if you answer as many parts as you can, you're pretty much guaranteeing yourself your top marks there. The way the marks will go is you will get 7 marks for your first 2 correct answers, and you will get 6 marks for each of your rest of your answers, and they will mark your best 8. So if you get 9 of them correct, you only need 8, you're getting 50 out of 50. So that's why I say to answer as many parts of question 4 as you can. With question 5 then, question 5 you're looking at the atom, the periodic table, including trends, bonding and radioactivity. And with this question, a lot of students go and do it. So obviously, if there's a higher volume of students doing a question, the standard is going to be slightly higher, particularly when it comes to marking. So it's very important in question 5 that you have your keywords in all of your answers. Definitions must be word perfect. And that is super important with question 5, as it is quite a popularly answered question. Question 6 is the first of the organic chemistry theory questions that we see, and it looks at fuels and thermochemistry. So with your fuels, you're looking at your octane number, autoignition, drawing your hydrocarbons of your alkanes, alkenes and alkynes. They all fit in there, but you're definitely going to have something on thermochemistry. So my top tip is that you need to know Hess's law and the heat of neutralization calculation. One of those will definitely appear in question 6, and when they do appear, they're usually worth around 12 marks, which is quite a good chunk of that question. So let's move on to section B. We've got questions 7, 8 and 9, and I kind of grouped these together just because of how they come up. So one of these questions out of 7, 8 and 9 will be an organic chemistry question, and it will look at your families and your reactions. So when we're looking at our families and our reactions, some key things that you'll definitely need to know in these questions are you'll need to know your functional groups of your families. You'll also need to know the naming of them, but most importantly, for your reactions, you'll need to know the mechanisms. So with the mechanisms that you need to know are addition and substitution. And a lot of the time how this comes up is it will come up as a flowchart kind of question. And with the flowchart kind of question, they will maybe bring you from alcohols to aldehydes to carboxylic acids. They'll ask you what process is it, so oxidation, reduction. Is it addition? Is it substitution? Is it an elimination reaction if we're looking at the dehydration of ethanol to ethene? All of those things are kind of there. So in particular, you need to know your families, you need to know your reaction types. And again, as I mentioned for previous questions, you need to know your reagents and you need to know your catalysts. And these are particularly important when you are looking at your oxidation or reduction reactions in organic chemistry. You need to know what are the reagents and what are the catalysts. The other 2 questions out of 7, 8 and 9 include, but are not limited to, the following topics. They mainly cover rates of reaction, equilibrium, water, acids, bases and pH. So realistically, I would say if rates comes up in question 3 as your experiment, it probably won't come up here. You might be more likely to get an equilibrium. Again, if a water titration came up in section A, probably unlikely you might get a water question in section B. But as you know, they all have their own kind of skill set that will be examined. So with rates of reaction there, you'd be looking at your graphing and your instantaneous rate. Equilibrium, you'd be looking at Le Chatelier's principle. You'd also be looking at your Kc value calculations, so looking at your Rice calculations. With water there, you'd be looking at pollution, water treatment, sewage treatment, all that kind of stuff. And then with acids, bases and pH, acids and bases and pH always come up together as a unit, so they'll bring up some theory on acids and bases around Arrhenius and Bronsted-Lowry, and from there they'll ask you to get the pH of a strong acid, strong base or weak base, and then they may link in something there on maybe the self-ionization of water, but they probably will bring up something on indicators and those indicator titration curves. So a lot to unpack there in 7, 8 and 9 of section B, but the main thing would be definitely to be knowing that there will be an organic question in there out of those 3. So the last kind of part of section B then is questions 10 and 11, and question 10 will have 3 parts of which you've to answer 2, and question 11 will be 4 parts of which you've to answer 2. Now part D of question 11 will always be from the option, so if you haven't covered the option with your teacher in class, again you will have 3 parts in question 11 of which you can answer 2. There'll be 4 there, but you won't be able to answer part D, so you'll have to pick 2 out of A, B and C. It's important to note in these questions here, 10 and 11, it is 25 marks per part. So there will be A, B and C. They'll be worth 25 marks each. And then you only need to do 2 of them to get your 50 marks. So I wouldn't recommend doing a third. That's wasting time. I would recommend doing your 2 parts and getting them perfectly correct. Typical topics then that appear on questions 10 and 11. You could be looking at atomic theory, equilibrium if it hasn't come up in 7, 8 and 9. Same with acids, bases and pH, and water if it hasn't come up in 7, 8 and 9. Stoichiometry will definitely make an appearance here. You're going to have some sort of calculations involving balanced equations and looking at ratios. Electrochemistry is one that can come up here, so if that's something you're looking to avoid, you might be limiting yourself in your choice of questions in 10 and 11. Organic can appear here as well, something maybe that hasn't been assessed earlier on in the other questions. Properties of gases is a popular one to come up here, your PV equals nRT calculation if it hasn't been assessed already. And then some more on oxidation and reduction, identifying oxidizing agents, identifying reducing agents, balancing redox equations, assigning oxidation numbers, all that kind of stuff can come up here. The last thing I just want to point out is any of these topics that I've gone through or suggestions, these are typical topics, they're not guaranteed topics, and of course the paper can always change, as in what topics come up where. This is just going off previous years to try and help you along. So, top tips that I have for you for the Leaving Cert Chemistry exam as a whole. Number 1, most important, answer 8 questions only. You need to remember that it is quality over quantity. You are getting marks for specific keywords, specific answers, and it doesn't matter whether you get that answer down in a page or in 2 lines, you are still going to get the same marks. I would also remind you of the time frames that we've set for your exam. So 10 minutes at the start and at the end for reading, and then 20 minutes per question. So what I would say to you is, if you have time to do an extra question, you only should be spending 20 minutes on each question. So if you have spare time to go and do another question, your answers probably aren't sufficient enough for the original 8 that you've done. It can often be a sign of scrambling, that you don't really have enough content knowledge on specific questions, so you're trying to spread yourself out a little bit more by answering 9. You have to remember that one of those questions that you've spent time answering then will be completely disregarded and you don't get marks for it. So please only answer 8 questions and answer them to the best of your ability. The next point to say is to ensure to show all steps in your calculations, and this is something that we see all the time when it comes to the maths. There's always steps missing, and a key one there that you definitely need to pay attention to is your molecular mass calculations. Okay, if you are doing any sort of calculations that involves converting grams to moles, it is not simply enough to say H2O equals 18. That will give you the marks, okay, once you get the answer correct. But let's say, for example, you wrote down H2O equals 17. You will lose marks at that point. Where if you have done the following, MR of H2O equals 2 plus 16 equals 18. There, if you then used 17 in your question as part of a calculation, the examiner saw that you'd written down 2 plus 16 is 18, you will get your marks. Your marks will carry through, okay? Because you will have done the calculation correctly. It will be seen as a slip. So instead of losing 3 marks, you'll only lose 1. So just to be careful there, show all steps in your calculations. Don't skip steps. You need to assume that the examiner knows absolutely nothing and you're taking them through the calculations step by step by step. It's like a house. You can't skip a brick or else your house will fall down at the end, and you don't want that to happen to you in the exam. Diagrams, they should be first of all fully labelled. I would recommend the diagrams are drawn in pencil, but if you are drawing in pencil, make sure to use a dark pencil. Lean on it fairly heavily that it can be seen, because these exams will be scanned for correction, because correction is online. So just to be aware of that, that if you are using pencil, that you use a very strong, heavy coloured pencil. Similarly for graphs, okay, graphs should be drawn on graph paper, and in previous years they have deducted 3 marks for graphs not on graph papers, just to be aware of that for graphs not on graph paper, that you can lose up to 3 marks, and you don't want to lose that. If your graph is perfectly correct and you're losing 3 marks because you haven't done it on graph paper, that's very disappointing. And think back to the start of the video, we said you can only really afford to lose 5 marks per question if you're aiming for a H1. Again, with graphs, you need to make sure, I do always tell my students, make sure you've got salt on your graph, you need to have a scale, you need to have axes, you need to have labels, and you also need to have a title. And again, graphs should be drawn in pencil, but go with a very dark shaded pencil, as I mentioned, for your diagrams. Make sure to answer what is asked. That is the key thing. Answer what is asked, not what you want to have been asked. So that involves reading the questions very carefully. I see it myself in classes, and I also see it when correcting the state exams, that students don't give the answer to the question that's actually asked. They give the answer to what they think was asked, which is not ideal. So I would recommend that when you are reading through the questions, that you highlight and underline key terms. And also that will draw your attention to those words when you are answering the question. So simple things like name versus describe. Do you know, if you are describing something when it's actually said to name it, do you know, you're wasting 2 minutes there of a question that you could pump into a calculation that you might be struggling with. So just to remember that. The last thing I would say to you is neat and tidy layout is favourable. Examiners like things to be neat, they like to be tidy, it has to be legible. With your Leaving Cert Chemistry exam as well, make sure you start each question on a new page that is written on the top of every single page in the answer booklet that you get, and students still don't pay attention to it. Every question should be started on a brand new page. And also what I would say to you is, when you're looking at marks in a question, always use the divide by 3 rule. So if the question is worth 15 marks, you should be writing 5 points. If a question is worth 12 marks, you should be writing 4 points. And that is just the divide by 3, so that each part you write would be worth approximately 3 marks. So now let's get to the part that you're probably all here for. I'm sure you're all here to see what are the predictions that we have for the Leaving Cert Chemistry paper for 2024. And what I'm going to say to you is, before we start these predictions should always be taken with extreme caution. None of us have an insight into what is on that exam. No one knows until you open the paper. I will be just as surprised as you will be when you open the paper on the day. These are just what I think could come up based off previous trends, based off what has come up in the past on the June paper and the deferred paper. So again, take them with a pinch of salt and don't put all your eggs in one basket. But I would be hoping that some of these questions that we're going to go through now would come up. So if we take a look at our titrations, we can see here I have all of the titrations that have been done since 2011 all the way up to last year. Now I haven't included the deferred paper in this table, but I have taken it into account. So we can see here that, as we've already spoken about for question 1, the main titrations are redox, acid, base and water. And for 2024, my prediction would be that it will be an acid-base titration. So that would mean either ethanoic acid or percentage water or crystallization. The reason I say that is we haven't seen an acid-base titration since 2020, so this year will be a great year to bring one up. But another one that I would think may come up would be the iron tablet. So 3 kind of titrations there. I'd be hoping one of them would come up. I would be more leaning towards the acid base because one of them hasn't come up since 2020. Now what you'll see on the right hand side, or the right hand column there, you'll see the word unit, and I've written in all of the units. Those units refer to the units that you will find the videos on exam revision for these experiments. So if you are looking, for example, let's look at 2020 was the water crystallization. If you're looking for that video for that titration, you will find it in unit 5 on examrevision.ie. So the next one for predictions is our organic, and with organic, if we take a look here, we can see first of all, when it comes to our unit topics on examrevision.ie, organic can all be found in unit 7. So if you are revising on the exam revision website, make sure to take a look at unit 7, where you will find all of your organic experiments. And what I think is going to come up this year for organic is a mixed question. I feel like they're going to put more of them, a few of them together. So like what they've been doing for question 3, splitting it, I think they're going to do the same this year. And I think it is going to be a mix of your clove oil and your benzoic acid. because as you can see in 2022 they only brought up the recrystallization of benzoic acid. So it is, since 2020 they haven't brought up the actual oxidation of the phenol methanol to benzoic acid. So I do think that could appear. And then clove oil kind of gets dotted around every now and then, so I think it's about time that that came up again. So our last predictions then would be for question 3, and with question 3 we know that that is the other question, and with that we've seen that lots of different things can come up. So gases, thermochemistry, rates of reaction, water, redox, organic has appeared there every now and then. So my personal prediction this year is that we are looking at a possible rates of reaction question on concentration or temperature, because the last time that's come up is since 2020 again, and also production of oxygen did come up in 2022, which was on rates. So I do think they're going to maybe look at factors that affect the rate of reaction this year. But my alternative would be the relative molecular mass of a volatile liquid. So I would definitely be knowing that. It hasn't come up since 2019, and they haven't really brought up gases a lot in section A either since 2019. So that is where I think we're going to be going there. Now, as I said, these predictions need to be taken with face value. There is no guarantee that these will come up. This is just my professional opinion based off previous exam papers and trends, and that is what I would be prepping for if I was you. Now also, just to remind you, that you can find all of the videos on these experiments on examrevision.ie, and we'll show you how in just a minute. So although I've given quite thorough predictions for section A, section B, it's a little bit more not predictable, but definitely you can see trends that happen every year. So hot topics, fuels is definitely a guaranteed question with some thermochemistry thrown in. You're guaranteed an organic question, and as I said there, we've gone through it already. You need to know your mechanisms and you need to know your families. And then the atom and the periodic table is pretty much a guaranteed question as well, also including their trends and including your radioactivity. Now, with those 3 questions there, if you were to answer those 3 questions, you would have 37.5%. If you got everything correct in those 3 questions and you got full marks in all of them, you would get 37.5% in your Leaving Cert Chemistry exam. So they are very important topics to know. They're very good to have. A particular one there to know would be organic, because it appears an experiment in section A, and also pretty much, there's a guaranteed question in section B plus maybe another one or a half one. So very important to know. I also think water could come up as a full question this year, with particular focus on sewage and water treatment, or rates of reaction if it doesn't appear in section A. Then either equilibrium or acids and bases, one of those I hope will make up the other question. So again, these are just predictions. You need to take them with a pinch of salt. Don't just run off predictions. You do need to have a backup. So I wouldn't be cutting out specific topics. I would just maybe be focusing my time more on certain topics than others, but I definitely wouldn't write off a certain number of topics just because of what prediction videos say or other prediction sites say. So before we finish up the video, I told you that Exam Revision is your one-stop shop for Leaving Cert Chemistry, and that is because we offer the complete revision package. So the complete revision package is hundreds of bite-sized video tutorials that make learning easier for students. So in your complete revision package, you will receive bite-sized video tutorial grinds. They are 10 to 12 minute videos on all of the topics on the Leaving Cert Chemistry course. We go through all of the experiments, we include calculations, we go through the theory of, let's say for example, the atom and the periodic table, all of the theories of that, any sort of calculation associated with any part of the course. The whole course is there. We also have PowerPoint presentations that you can look at. We've H1 standard notes as well. Use these notes and you are very well set for your exam. We have exam papers and mock paper questions with an exam builder that will allow you to build your own exam and personalise it, and marking schemes follow with that, obviously. We also have self-correcting quizzes, and these quizzes consist of questions from all topics. There are calculation questions in it, theory questions, and they're multiple choice, so you can work from there as well. There's also a reflection log that you can use to track your progress through the Leaving Cert Chemistry course as you complete it. And for the rest of the year, if you use the coupon code 2024 tips, that's here on the screen, 2024 tips, it will give you 10% off the complete revision package. And that is very good value for money. So if you think of all the money that you would maybe spend on grinds, this is an online grinds platform and you can access it anytime you like. There you can stop, play, pause the videos, you can come back to them, you can complete a question, you can mark it, all at your own pace, which is really, really important for your revision. So that's why Exam Revision is your one-stop shop for Leaving Cert Chemistry. Exam Revision also offers lots of junior cycle subjects. It may not be relevant to you, but it may be relevant to a sibling. So for junior cycle, we do English, Irish, Maths, History, Science, Geography, Business and Home Economics. And for Leaving Cert, which may be of more interest to you, or again, some of your siblings, we do English, Irish, we do Maths, ordinary level and higher level, we do History, Geography, Ag Science, Physics, Applied Maths, Biology, obviously Chemistry with me, Business, Economics, French, Spanish, Music and PE. And you can get 10% off any package on any of those subjects using the coupon code 2024 tips, so 2024 tips. So the last thing I want to inform you about is our May revision courses. They are 1-day intensive revision courses, and they will get you 100% exam ready for junior cert and leaving cert exams in May. These revision courses run from Saturday the 18th of May to Sunday the 26th of May, and you can visit our website to book. They include exam technique, H1 standard notes. You can watch them live, but you will also get a recording on demand, and you'll get key tips and notes with focus on the most common topics that will appear on the exam. So also you can see lots of students and teachers have given us reviews online. They recommend Exam Revision. They compliment it on the videos that we offer, the ease of access for students, and most importantly that they can do it whenever and wherever they like. So it's not just students that use it, teachers use it in classes as well. And again, a reminder that you can use the coupon code 2024 tips to get 10% off our complete revision package. So with that, I wish you the very best of luck with your Leaving Cert Chemistry exam for 2024, and don't forget to visit examrevision.ie to check out our complete revision package, and hopefully we'll see you on another video or revision course soon here at Exam Revision.